What's the greatest challenge of higher education in the world and in the United States nowadays?
Well, first let me say it's just a delight to be with you and on this show and to be here in Brazil. You know, when you think about challenges in the world or in the United States, I always like to match it first with a sense of what are the opportunities and what are the advancements. As the vice president at Yale, I have the responsibility for Yale's internationalization efforts. So I spend a lot of time going around the world. In the first 6 months of this year, I'll go to Asia twice, I'll go to Turkey, I'll go to Switzerland, I'll go to the Middle East. I have 2 countries here in South America, and one of my deputies has been in Africa this past year. So I do have a lot of opportunity to talk with ministers of education and to visit with the presidents of leading universities. So I can be your scout on what do I see out there. First, the promising news. There is an incredible consensus on the importance of university education as a driver for economic well-being, both for individuals in terms of advancing their personal situation, but also in terms of advancing the economic situation of a country and the health parameters as well. And you can look at it in many different kinds of measures. In the United States, a recent survey has said that if you go to university, on average, university graduates make 80% more money per year than the average high school graduate. Or go halfway around the world. You go to Africa, sub-Sahara Africa, very different situation. The results show that if mothers have additional years of schooling, even primary schooling, the health of their children is much advanced. A real indicator of an understanding of education and how it's going to nurture young people, nurture families, and obviously the health index of a whole country. But we can look at a very different kind of environment. I'm always surprised to recognize that if you go to Great Britain, you would be surprised to see that 10% of the venture capital of businesses of all of Europe is in one tiny town. What's the town? It is the university town where Cambridge University is. That university has been a magnet for economic innovation in terms of venture capital. So whether it's sub-Sahara Africa or the United States or Great Britain, indications that more education is better for the welfare not only of individuals but of a society. That's really good news. What do I see as the challenges? The challenges, I think, derive from, in some ways, the opportunities. We see in the last 30 years or so an explosion of the number of students going to university in so many parts of the world. Let's just take India. From 1970 to 2007, there was a 6-fold increase in the number of students going to university in India. Dramatic increases. And of course, if you look here, if you look in Brazil, you look in Argentina, in the last 20 or 30 years, burgeoning numbers of students having the opportunity to go to university. That is all very good news. But the challenges I see as I talk to others around the world is that the growing opportunity to attend university does not translate necessarily into better education. More people going to school is not necessarily the recipe for excellence, or access to education is not equal to excellence. So what do we need to do to increasingly have excellence be the signature of education at the tertiary level? I have been listening attentively to some individuals in other parts of the world, so I'll give you solutions that others are positing very far away from Brazil. I spent a lot of time in China, and they, of course, have the largest university system in the world. It is impressive to think that since 1990, the government has tripled the amount of funding they have given to tertiary or university education. But even with now having the largest system in the world, the Chinese leadership is the first to say it doesn't mean that the biggest is the best. Mm-hmm. So what are they starting to do? They have asked Yale University, my institution, to be a tutor or a mentor to some of the universities to try and design some new programs of tertiary education, because they recognize that the reliance on old-fashioned methods of instruction, that simply try and have a teacher convey information in a very standardized way and ask students to then give it back to them on examinations by rote memorization is not the way to facilitate real innovation and learning for the 21st century. Of course, why? We know that the half-life of knowledge is decreasing so much. Many of us grew up thinking we knew the planets in the solar system, that we can name them. And then lo and behold, 15 years ago, they find that there's a new planet that's out there beyond Pluto. So even something as basic as that, something as seen to be immovable and unchangeable as the solar system, we recognize even that changes. So what's the import? The import is that the length of knowledge in terms of its being current is shortening, even as our lives are expanding. I was just looking it up, but in Brazil, the average lifespan now is over 70 years of age. Mm-hmm. Well, if you go back just to 1900, my bet is that the average lifespan of those in this country would be like in our country, somewhere in the 40s. You would die sometime during your 40s on average. If you were so fortunate to go to the university in 1900, by the time you graduated, you were halfway to your grave. You did not have to have a university education last you for very long. Now you need a university education that will stay current as new knowledge increases. And that is calling on us to try and educate young people for much more critical skills of analysts, of analyzing information, of being able to be creative problem solvers, and not simply to be absorbing like a sponge a particular body of knowledge. Well, we at Yale, like so many universities, I think here and in our country, recognize that we are trying to prepare our young people for a truly global environment that they will live in, whether it's for their business career, their professional career, their artistic expressions, that it is a truism that the world is shrinking. So we have asked ourselves, what does it take to be a great global university? We're very pleased that the rankings in London put us in the top 2 or 3 every year, but we recognize we need to be looking ahead for what this century will demand of young people who will be leaders in the middle of this century. And we have developed 3 strategies. The first is that we want to make sure on our home campus in Connecticut, about an hour and a half from New York City, that we have as global a set of opportunities as possible. So we have 50 foreign languages available for our students. We have 3,000 courses where over 700 of them touch upon international or global subjects. We have new majors in such things as contemporary Middle East affairs. We have new professors of Hindu studies. We, of course, have for over 100 years had serious programs in Latin American studies and a very distinguished Latin American Council of Faculty. But we want to make sure that the attention we have given to Latin America and South America for so long, we have globally represented around the world. So our first initiative is to make sure that we have a very, very robust international curriculum. And a part of that, which is quite unusual for U.S. universities, is that we guarantee every undergraduate student the opportunity to go abroad once during his or her 4 years. And if they are on financial aid, we will give them money to go abroad. And when I mean going abroad, it's not simply to go to another university for a semester or for a year. We do that, of course. Everybody does that. But we have come up with very creative programs for our summer, for the months of June, July, and August. Students can go and have an internship abroad in one of 20 foreign countries, and our alumni give housing for them, their co-curricular programs, and it gives them a chance to really experience a different culture in a interesting and demanding internship experience. So we see that as expanding the curriculum outside the classroom, but something we want to do for our students. The second part of our internationalization initiative really is bringing the best and brightest from around the world to Yale. I just mentioned our investment to have generous financial aid for those who are pursuing a first university degree. We have even more generous scholarships for those who are interested in pursuing a PhD degree. If you get admitted to Yale, again, anywhere from around the world, for any of our programs for PhDs in the arts and sciences, literally from astronomy to zoology, history, economics, political science, all of our subjects, you have to pay no tuition for any year of the 5 years you study, and we will give everyone a minimum annual living allowance of $25,000 US. So we are making a major investment in those we believe who will go back home and become leading scholars in their own universities. And we're quite proud of our heritage in that we have had those who have gone on to be distinguished faculty right here in the University of São Paulo. We have those who are deans, professors, and we are eager to continue that tradition by this kind of generous financial aid policy to bring the best and brightest to us. The third part of the strategy is a bit audacious. We say we want to be a university of consequence in the world. And what this means is that we want to join forces with other leading universities in multiple continents to create powerful research networks so that we can leverage the intellectual talents on several campuses for the common good. So this week, in fact, earlier today, I was meeting with a noted professor at the University of São Paulo's medical school, and we are setting up a network which has one hub at Yale, one hub that's already established at the University of Ghana in Africa, and one at São Paulo. And each of these hubs is researching some of the very difficult issues involving infectious diseases, whether it is dengue epidemic possibilities here, whether it's malaria in Africa, whether it's hookworm kinds of issues. And we have faculty and students for the last several years going back and forth between Africa and Yale. And now we're going to expand it to have São Paulo and Yale and Africa. And we're in conversations to add a university in the Middle East, because we think that the time has come for universities to join forces for the common good. Because you know, we're not like companies. Corporations are at their heart competitive. You know, they're trying to figure out who can get the most market share, who can get the most revenues. Will Coke sell more soda than Pepsi? But universities' mission is to extend the common good and to help to generate and to convey knowledge. So our basic element is collaborative, but we haven't really worked across borders as research teams as well as we might. So our third goal is that, and one of the reasons I'm here in São Paulo this week is to help celebrate this new research enterprise that we are launching with the University of São Paulo. The opportunities for technology are extraordinarily exciting. When I think about education, I believe that education may be the only industry whose business model has been unchanged for the last century. If you think about it, almost any kind of human endeavor has changed dramatically in the last century. If you take transportation, if I had come to visit São Paulo a century ago, I would not have come by the plane. If you think about communication, there was no cell phones, there was barely the telephone. If you think about manufacturing, there was not global supply sources. You would have your own manufacturing from all the natural resources in your own region at best. If you look at entertainment, there was no DVDs, there was no films. Almost everything has a different business model today than 100 years ago. But how about education? The way you and I were taught is the same way Aristotle and Confucius taught his students. It's a teacher in the physical presence of his or her students.
Face to face.
Face to face. And you think about it, it's been unchanged for over a millennium. And we have not had any revolution in education the way we have had in almost every other enterprise. And I think the internet and technology gives us this new revolution. And we are in need of it because I mentioned the astonishing statistics about the growth of those pursuing higher education. I gave the example of India, where there's been a 6-fold increase in those attending university since 1970. Well, you can't build enough new colleges and universities to accommodate all those who need to benefit from higher learning. The Chinese government, in a survey in 2007, said that they would need to build 1,500 new universities in 5 years. That's more than one a week. Obviously, the old model does not scale to accommodate the needs for the knowledge economy of the 21st century. And so we are fortunate that the technology aid is there if we are creative enough to use it in ways that will be interactive and to really share the best of instructional techniques. I'm really quite impressed by the new virtual university that's being launched here in São Paulo, directed toward teacher education, because in the United States and in Asia, everywhere I go, there's a recognition that teachers are at the heart of the educational enterprise. And we need the very best teachers who are the best equipped and best skills, particularly in our primary and secondary schools. And I do think the technological revolution can help those kinds of instructional opportunities, particularly, as well as tertiary education. How do we try and keep this really engagement? How do we get students engaged using the new technology? Let me give you 2 examples that I've seen. One is from our classes at Yale, and one is from Mexico. The first is imagine this classroom experience, whether it's distant or whether it's in the traditional setting. You are about to listen to your lecture, and you take your mobile phone, and you have your mobile phone ready. And the teacher doesn't give you a lecture for 50 minutes or an hour. The teacher speaks for 5 or 6 minutes. Let's pretend that it's a science lecture in physics, introductory physics. And the teacher has just given you 5 or 6 minutes about the coefficient of friction, but then stops and poses a question to the students, both in the classroom and those at the distant locations, and say, here's my question. The answer might be A, or B, or C, or D. And the students take their cell phone and say, I think the answer is A. Other students say, I think the answer is B. And then the teacher immediately could see that on the screen that only 30% of the students got the right answer. This can prompt a student to do one of 2 things. For those that are in the presence of students, they can say, look, turn to the other students right around you and spend 3 or 4 minutes. And the student who knew the right answer, that student becomes the teacher and explains it to the other students. And then the students are becoming the interactive mentors to other students. The students who are at a distant location, they could listen to the teacher who would go back over the materials and explain why the right answer is C or whatever the answer is. This is actually going on. We do it at Yale, and scientific studies have shown that if you stop and ask the question and then provide ways for going back over the materials, at the end of the session, students retain and have absorbed 35% more of the materials. Because why? They're not just listening to it in a passive way, just taking notes, but they're engaged, they're thinking about it, they're explaining it to their classmates if they're in class. I think that's extremely powerful.
Yes.
Another example I've seen is at the University of Monterrey Tech in Mexico.
Yes, we've been there.
It's very interesting. Yeah. They have many interesting innovations,
yes.
but one of the ones I like is the following. Many of us, when we had writing assignments from our teachers, we would go into the library and read some books, do some research, write an essay, and submit it to the teacher who would grade it. It's valuable. But at Monterrey Tech, they have the students do the first draft of the essay, but then online, the student shares it with 6 other students who could be at a very distant parts. Yes. The students then have to edit one another's paper. And because of the way they can do the computer program, everyone can see that Linda made these changes to Joanna's paper, and we can see Joelle made these kinds of suggestions for Joanna's paper. The teacher can see not only what Joanna wrote initially, but can see how the other students gave wise, insightful commentary. Then the teacher can also see how well Joanna listened and looked and absorbed the editorial suggestions from the other students, because then she would make another draft for the final submission. So here you have engaged students as mentors and critics of one another's work. The promise and the prospects for this technological revolution are not going to be limited by the technology. They're going to be limited by the human beings. The question is, will faculty prove to be innovative enough to take advantage of this new technology so that they change from learning styles, which are primarily rooted in one-way transmission of information to students, to grasp the exciting potential of changing the pedagogy, changing the instruction, to have it be interactive with their students. And if we find enough faculty who are excited by the prospect of technology, I think the promise is almost endless. I have been so gratified by the professors at Yale who teach in this open Yale courses that they are excited by the fact that there could be students in Argentina and Brazil and Chile and Turkey who are taking their courses for free because, of course, it gives much greater satisfaction of how they are making contributions to young people around the world. So I think it's unlimited potential if there's a creativity to grab hold of it.
How to take advantage of new technology to distribute the university's intellectual treasure beyond campus, and why it's important to share knowledge in a digital world.
Well, I think it's important to share knowledge as much as we can, and the digital world allows us to do it much less expensively and to have distribution so much wider. If you think about it, it was only half a century ago. If you wanted to distribute knowledge, a faculty member would have to write a book, it would have to get published, it would have to be put on a ship, it would take a month to get down here to Buenos Aires, it would go to a warehouse, it would then go out there, then it might have been on a truck that would come up here to São Paulo. It could take months to get new knowledge shared. Now, of course, on the internet, it's instantaneous. And I think in terms of the smaller world in which we are living, it's important that new knowledge that can advance humankind be disseminated as quickly as possible. You think about infectious diseases, you think about medical breakthroughs, or you think about news events that now we are witnessing in real time. So that's why I think it's important. I also think the new technology has the potential to share not only teaching, as we've been talking about it, but publications themselves. So we at Yale have been experimenting with online magazines, not simply scholarly publications. And so if you go online and go to Yale Global, we have an online publication from our Center for the Study of Globalization. The director is a former president of Mexico, Ernesto Zedillo, and every week some of the best articles to give insights about many topics in international affairs are available for free to anyone in the world. And in the last year, we have said, look, it's good that we have articles there from leading publications in Brazil and in China and in India, but not everyone speaks English.
Sure.
So we're now working to have different language versions of the same publication. So we have launched a Chinese edition of Yale Global, and we're hoping in the next year that we'll be able to have a Spanish and a Portuguese version as well. So that would be one way in which the technology allows us to broadcast information so that many, many people can take advantage of it all around the world. You know, I think we talk about a global village, but an essence of a global village is a community. And communities, whether it's small neighborhoods here in São Paulo, whether it's where we live in Connecticut in the United States, communities take care of each other. And if in this century we can spend more of our time caring for one another instead of being in conflict with one another, which characterized so much of the 20th century, that is a very noble goal for us in higher education to help young people.
My director, the director of my television channel, she said that she read an article in the New York Times discussing the issue that now in the United States, in the American universities, it has been more female students than male students.
The thought of women having more than 50% representation in almost anything makes a woman of my generation only smile. When I was going to university for law school, there were only 25 women in my class. And so I'm delighted to see in the United States and in so much of the world that women are being given full access and so many opportunities for participation. I look at our own graduates at Yale. The current U.S. Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, is a graduate of ours. But the most recent Foreign Minister female of Japan is also a graduate of ours. The most recent addition to the U.S. Supreme Court is a woman who's also a Yale graduate. So I think what we're seeing is perhaps finally that women are being given the opportunities in business, in the judiciary, in higher education, in government that they have long deserved.
Wonderful. Okay.
Thank you.
We're done.
Thank you.
Well, thanks to you.